6:38 Nashville's morning news on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you very much for joining us. Jonathan Fahey is on the Newsmaker Hotline, former ICE director, former federal prosecutor as well. Jonathan, always love having you on and trying to make heads or tails out of the Trump hush money trial. And so first place I want to go is what seems to me, and I'm clearly a layman, but the very bizarre jury instructions where, okay, y'all have to agree whether or not he's innocent or guilty. However, if you find him guilty, you don't have to agree on the reasons why. I mean, that just, I don't know. It's sort of baffling to me. Is this unconstitutional?
Yeah, I think this is really problematic, and I was trying to think of it like an analogous situation, and I couldn't. I actually talked to some other people that have done this, like, is this ever common in other types of criminal cases? And no one could come up with an example. And what makes this so bad is, as you know, and probably most of your listeners know, the other crime that they have to prove, or proving another crime, is what elevates all of these offenses from just misdemeanors to felonies. Mm-hmm. And now the judge basically gave them, I think they have a list of 3 to choose from. So it could have been, the jury could be, 4, 4, 4, or any other type of split. So it is very interesting. The thing that makes this the most serious and has the greatest consequences to Donald Trump is the thing that they don't seem to have unanimity on. And yeah, that's a great concern. And I think it's real problematic because, there is Supreme Court, case law that says anything that basically elevates the maximum punishment needs to be proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And their argument would be, well, we proved a crime, they agreed that a crime was committed beyond a reasonable doubt, although they may not have agreed on the crime, which I think is very concerning. And that may be his best issue, meaning Donald Trump's on appeal if he's not successful. But again, as we've talked about, that doesn't really help him when the whole point of this is just an election interference prosecution. The Democrats still win under that theory.
Right. Jonathan Fahey joining us. This is from the Associated Press. Mershon gave the jurors 3 possible unlawful means they can apply to Trump's charges: falsifying other business records, breaking the Federal Elections Campaign Act, or submitting false information on a tax return. So somebody was asking me yesterday, and I don't know the answer to this, but I mean, clearly, I believe that you're a great legal mind. We've got Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, and a whole bunch of other folks who are really Democrats in how they vote. But they're looking at this, and this is clearly, it seems to me, unconstitutional. So when you look at what Judge Mershon is doing, who holds him accountable? How does this whole thing work? Because clearly he's not abiding by the Constitution.
Yeah, the only way really that he could be held accountable is being reversed by the appellate court, so his decisions could be reversed. But in terms of anything else, he's doing, I think judges are, I believe they're elected up in New York. So, they're going to be happy with him up in New York because he's, from all accounts, really putting his thumb on the scale for the government in every step of the way, which generally in a criminal case, the whole idea is protecting the rights of the accused, and the judges should be very conscious of those every step of the way. And this is a novel prosecution, not just the former president, but under these theories. So something that's probably never been done before. Nobody has ever brought any examples of it being done before. And instead of doing things that might be favorable to the defendant when there's a close call, everything is to be favorable to the prosecution, which is quite concerning. And I think the optics of this are quite bad under the, if another court were to take a serious look at this. But again, the Democrats, their whole point is to prosecute Donald Trump, keep him off the campaign trail. They want to be able to say he's a convicted felon if he's convicted and things like that. So, they're getting what they want out of this case, and it's very sad. It's completely shameful that this is even going on.
Alan Dershowitz had an interesting point because most folks, including me, and it sounds like you too, believe that this will all be taken care of in the appellate court. But one of the things that Dershowitz said, and he knows because this actually happened to him, is his worry is that the appellate court judge, he doesn't want to be the guy that strikes down a conviction because that ultimately would mean that it is a pathway to Donald Trump being president, and that appellate judge, whoever it is, doesn't want to be shunned and shamed by friends and family and his circle of friends. That's what Dershowitz said. This is what he experienced. Alan Dershowitz did. Number one, is there any worry to that? And if this is, if they come back with a guilty verdict, how long does that appellate process take? Does that take us beyond November?
I think it takes beyond November, because I think typically what will happen is if he is convicted, then they'll set the case down for a couple months or probably a few months for a sentencing in front of the same judge. He will then be sentenced, and then at that point the case is ripe to take an appeal, and that goes through the whole system where there's briefing and other things. So that could probably be upwards of another 6 months to a year. So we're looking at probably well into 2025. So, and I think Alan Dershowitz's point among the circle of people, and I think he's talked about it, once he started, pointing out some problems with the way Donald Trump was being treated legally, he was basically shunned in his circle. I think he would talk about on Martha's Vineyard and other places, just because he was pointing things out. And he's a Democrat, and I don't even think he was a huge fan. I'm not even sure he voted for Donald Trump, but they basically shunned him in his circle. So it's pretty scary that, and that's the scary thing with these jurors, is they're pulled from a pool of 85 to 90% of people that voted against Donald Trump, and to have them to think they will be able to go back to their communities or whatever their communities are. If they don't convict them, it's going to be very hard. It's going to take a lot of courage on behalf of these jurors, and I hope at least one of them has it, but I'm quite concerned about this.
So let me ask you this then. Guilty verdict, goes to appeal, that takes months. If Trump wins the presidency, then what happens to this case, and frankly the other cases as well, when the president is in the White House?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's probably some really good supremacy clause type of arguments that you cannot do anything to him when he's in the White House, meaning sentencing, or continue on with some of these other cases, particularly the state cases. I mean, I think the federal cases will go away because he will be in charge of the executive branch, and they will, his new attorney general will dismiss those cases. But the other cases, I think, will be held in abeyance until the end of his presidency, which at that point would be 2029. So you would also wonder, would there be any appetite at that point, because he couldn't run again and things like that. So, so I think everything would basically go on hold. I mean, I think the appeals process could go on with this case if he's convicted, but as far as anything executing any sort of sentence against him would have to be on hold until the end of the presidency.
So I agree with you. This is concerning. I was concerned that there would be a guilty verdict. My prediction was a hung jury. With these new jury instructions, though, I'm not so sure if a hung jury is going to be in the cards. I believe that realistically, former President Donald Trump could be found guilty. Based on the jury instructions, I feel like Judge Marchand has really, and I've made this analogy, if you will, a couple of different times, where the judge really is like leading the jury on a leash towards a conviction, towards a guilty verdict, because everything that he has done in this case, from overruling the objections of the defense, the constant objections by the defense, to how he has run this trial, really has had one goal in mind, and that is to lead the jury towards a conviction of Donald Trump. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a couple of things that are concerning. One, you have the jury instruction issue. But the other thing is he didn't let Donald Trump present a defense on why what they did was not a violation of federal election law, which is one of these secondary crimes. And, and everyone that's looked at this on the federal election law side of this, it's not even ambiguous, but this was not a violation of federal campaign finance law, or, this wasn't an illegal donation, as they would say. So I find that the most concerning, because typically I was a prosecutor, almost 20 years, like 19 years. And generally, criminal cases, the defendants have a lot of leeway in what they can say and what they can do because, again, like we talked about, the whole system is set up to protect the rights of the accused. So, yeah, they may have a crazy defense. They may want to make an argument, and generally judges just go along with it. This certainly wasn't a crazy defense, but it's just very interesting. It just shows putting a thumb on the scales, and then you compare the Stormy Daniels testimony versus the Costello testimony, who Costello was Trump's only witness, and basically shutting them down, fighting with them, as opposed to just letting them, testify, which his testimony, what substantively was quite powerful, saying how Cohen was a liar and didn't have anything on Trump, and all of a sudden now he has all of this stuff. It's pretty compelling stuff, and he seemed to shut that down while Stormy Daniels just had free reign to talk about totally irrelevant and prejudicial things about Donald Trump or things that would make people, uncomfortable or whatever. And yeah, so those types of things are quite concerning. And you would also think of a liberal jurisdiction like New York, where they're basically not prosecuting anyone. They have a DA that ran on a platform of not prosecuting people, that you would typically have more defendant-friendly judges. And you have this judge that, it's quite remarkable to me that particularly all the circumstances, former president of the United States, unique theory of prosecution, all of these things, you think there would be some leeway on the defense, and he's had none. So I do think every step of the way, it does seem like the prosecution has gotten it's seemingly every close call and things like that in this case, and the prosecution got to do whatever they wanted in this case.
Let me ask you, so we have all kinds of different polling out there that shows that, it matters. Other polls say this doesn't matter. You not only do legal analysis, you do political analysis as well. Which do you believe? Do you believe that this does matter? Do you believe that this does not matter? President Biden is going to be speaking after the verdict comes in, no matter what it is. I believe that they're hoping that obviously it's a guilty verdict, so he can, brand Donald Trump as, convicted felon. Do you think the American people really care much about this?
I don't think generally people care that much about it. I mean, it's been all over the news and the main story, but I just don't get the sense that there's like the buzz that there was like for like an O.J. Simpson type of thing, that everyone is glued to this. However, if you're looking at, a close race with a couple people, a couple percentage in the middle that are, movable voters, it can make a difference. I mean, I think Donald Trump could still win if he's convicted. I think it's harder. But I think if he's acquitted, I think he jumps up by so much because Biden's campaign we've talked about. I mean, he's personally a complete disaster, and on all the issues, he's losing, save abortion. But yeah, so I do think it can be concerning. And it is funny that they're going to get on, and he'll do one of these after the verdict, we must respect the rule of law type of speeches. It'll be just so nauseating. Meanwhile, you have people like Senator Schumer that are on a daily basis undermining the Supreme Court in every which way they can, or Joe Biden didn't exactly respect the law with classified documents or anything else, but you'll have one of these sanctimonious, nauseating type of things.
Oh, yeah.
And, but they're going after probably, it's probably fighting over these people that haven't made up their mind, which there aren't that many now, at least looking at these polls, assuming they're accurate. The undecideds don't seem particularly high. But yeah, it is concerning. But if Donald Trump were to win or get a hung jury, I think he gets an enormous boost out of this.
All right, Jonathan, I've got 20 seconds. Your prediction: hung jury, guilty verdict, not guilty.
I would say at this point, based on the instructions, I think it's a better chance of a guilty verdict. But I think it's just hard to predict 12 random people we don't know anything about. So a strong qualifier on that.